All right, let's dive into one of the most legendary texts on strategy ever written, the Book of Five Rings, by the master swordsman Miyamoto Musashi. But to really get it, you gotta forget the samurai you think you know from the movies. We're going way deeper, into the mind of a man who had to carve out his own path when the world changed around him.
This is the image we all have in our heads, right? The stoic warrior totally prepared to die for his lord, no questions asked. And yeah, that idea, that resolute acceptance of death, was the absolute bedrock of the samurai code. It's what made them so fearsome, but it also set them up for a huge problem when the fighting stopped.
And this is the question that changes absolutely everything. See, Musashi lived right when centuries of non-stop civil war were finally ending. Peace was actually breaking out. So, if you're a warrior and your whole purpose is tied to war, what on earth do you do when the wars just stop? What's your purpose when your master is gone and your skills are suddenly useless? So you see, samurai isn't just one thing. On one hand, you have the ideal, the warrior who serves a lord, with a strict code and a place in the hierarchy. But then you have the Ronin, the wave man. He's masterless, an outsider, forced to just wander and figure out his own reason for being. This is the world that forged Miyamoto Musashi.
Okay, so let's set the scene here. To really get Musashi, you have to understand the time he lived in. The guy was literally caught between two different worlds, the bloody, dying age of constant war and the brand new dawn of a long, unprecedented peace.
I mean, just look at this timeline. Musashi's life is perfectly sandwiched between this massive, violent unification of the country and the start of a peace that would last for over 200 years. He was a man trained for a world that was literally vanishing right before his eyes.
And this new era of peace created thousands of men just like him, the Ronin. These wave men were warriors set adrift. Their only skill was fighting, but there were no more official wars to fight. So what did they do? They wandered the country, looking for duels, looking for work, or maybe just looking for a reason to exist. This was Musashi's world.
And Musashi was a true product of this violence. Get this. He had his first duel at the age of 13, and he didn't just win. He killed a fully trained adult samurai with a wooden stick at 13 years old. And he was just getting started. By the time he was 29, he'd fought in over 60 duels and battles, and he never lost. Not once. He became this absolute legend, this wild, wandering swordsman who seemed completely unbeatable. But here's the thing that makes Musashi so incredible. All that winning, it wasn't enough for him. He looked back at this perfect record and realized something profound. He felt he hadn't won because he truly understood strategy. It was just raw talent, maybe even luck. So at the very peak of his powers, he dedicated the rest of his life to finding the principle behind it all, the true way. Now, to explain his grand philosophy, you'd think he'd use some kind of mystical, complicated language, right? Nope. He used a simple, powerful, and really practical analogy that anybody could get, the craft of a carpenter. And this is just brilliant. For Musashi, strategy isn't some abstract art. It's a craft. A commander needs to know his men just like a carpenter knows his wood. You have to understand their strengths and weaknesses to use them right. Your battle plan has to be as solid as a building's blueprint. And you better know your weapons inside and out, just like a master knows his tools. It's all about what works in the real world. Yeah, Musashi had zero patience for show-offs. He saw other sword schools teaching all these flashy techniques, what he called decorative flowers, that were designed to look good and attract students. He was all about the nut, the simple, strong, practical core of strategy, the part that actually gets the job done. So, near the end of his life, he goes off to live as a hermit in a cave. Seriously. And that's where he finally writes all of this down. He structured his entire philosophy into 5 scrolls, or rings, with each one representing a different element and a different level of understanding. And the whole thing builds so logically. First, you have the ground book, which is your foundation. Then comes the water book, which is all about flexibility. The fire book is about the heat of combat itself. The wind book is about understanding your competition. And finally, you get to the void book, which is that next level of mastery. The ground book lays it all out, and this one quote is pretty much the core of it. Do nothing which is of no use. Simple, right? But so powerful. Every action, every bit of training, every single thought has to have a purpose. No wasted effort.
It's a philosophy of extreme practicality. Next up, the water book. The key idea here is that your readiness shouldn't be something you just turn on and off. Your posture, your awareness, the way you carry yourself in daily life, that should be the same as your stance in a duel. It's about a state of constant, calm preparedness. Now we get to the fire book, the heat of the battle, and this is just pure strategic genius. Don't just react to what your opponent does. Control them. You actively shut down anything they do that could possibly help them, but you let them waste their energy on moves that don't matter. You control the fight by controlling their choices. In a Wind book, Masashi talks all about how important it is to study other schools and strategies. And the goal isn't to copy them, it's to understand them. Because by seeing their strengths, and especially their weaknesses and biases, you can understand your own path so much better. And finally, we arrive at the void. This is his most philosophical idea, but it's not about nothingness. It's about clarity. Think about an athlete who's in the zone, or a musician who's just playing, not thinking about the notes. That's the void. It's a state you reach when you've trained so hard that your actions become completely natural, intuitive, and perfectly in sync with the moment. So why are we still talking about a 400-year-old book written by a hermit swordsman? Because the principles Musashi figured out in his search for the way of the sword, well, they turned out to be universal. They apply to so much more than fighting. Seriously, you've got business execs using his book to plan corporate takeovers. Artists and programmers use it as a guide for discipline and focus. It teaches a timeless lesson. Winning comes from wisdom and understanding, not just brute force. And maybe, most of all, in a world that never stops changing, his message of self-reliance is more relevant than ever. And this might be his most powerful idea of all. From one thing, know 10,000 things. Think about that for a second. His belief was that if you can deeply, truly master the underlying principles of one single craft, it doesn't matter if it's sword fighting or carpentry or coding, you can unlock an understanding of everything. The patterns repeat. The way is the same everywhere. In the end, Musashi, the undefeated legend, summed up his entire life's work with just 2 words: humility and hard work. Not genius, not God-given talent, but the humble daily grind of practice and study. So I guess that leaves us all with a question to think about. How do you apply that way, that relentless, humble search for the principle, to your own craft?